Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a book review, straight to the point. I desperately want to talk about this book because it changed me. It really did change me in like 70 some pages. I'm a different person than I was when I picked this book up. This was my February book of the month pick, and it's A Good Animal by Sarah Moore. I think it doesn't come out until February 22nd, 24th, one of those two, I think. One of the 20s in the even number. Anyways, doesn't come out yet, but it was like one of the early release picks. And I picked it because book of the month lately has felt geared more towards like lit fic, contemporary fic, romance, and less towards like horror and fantasy. So sometimes I find myself struggling to pick a book, and I usually will just skip the month if I can't. But this month I ended up picking A Good Animal. I don't know why. It's a story about a 17-year-old boy who grows up on a farm, a sheep farm in Michigan. I have never lived on a farm. I've never worked on a farm. I've never lived in Michigan. I've never been a 17-year-old boy. So why did that call to me? I have no idea. But this is one of those rare moments where I'm like, something was at work in the universe that I believe in, and it led me to this book, and I'm so grateful for that. So in the story, you follow Everett. Like I said, 17-year-old boy. His family owns a sheep farm. They grow them, well, they raise them either to be show animals or to be livestock, and they sell them off. He has his best friend Charlie, who I have my feelings about Charlie, and I can tell you that by the end of the book my perception of him changed quite a bit, to be honest. So he has his best friend, he has his brother and his sister, mom and dad, all of that. They live in this, backwoods town, kind of very small. Everybody knows everybody. And he's in his senior year of high school, and we all know how senior year can be either the very best year of your life or like, God, please wipe me off the face of the earth year of your life. I feel like there's no real happy medium whenever I've talked to people about what their high school experience was like. It was either one or the other. So in the story, right, you meet Everett, you meet his friend Charlie. You can kind of say their friendship is one of convenience because they're kind of the only two farm kids in their town. And so they build a bond based off of that. And Everett is a little bit more soft-spoken. He's a little bit more shy. I think that he has some self-esteem issues there at the beginning. Whereas Charlie is a little bit more confident. He looks a little bit more buff compared to Everett from the way they're described. So it kind of makes sense that Charlie has like a more outgoing personality in the sense of the story. In this town, a 17-year-old girl moves with her dad, Mary. And Everett meets Mary, and it's just immediately he's infatuated with her because she's new and shiny and she's not from their town or like a small town, it sounds like. So he meets Mary, and they get off to a rocky start. Quite a rocky start. And then later on in the book, Everett has to deal with the consequences of his decisions. Some of the decisions he's made when it comes to the farm and to the sheep and wanting to kind of branch out on his own within the farm life. He has to deal with the consequences of the decisions he's made in an effort to get there, to have his own kind of setup at the farm. He butts heads a lot with his dad, who's a very old-fashioned guy, obviously, and he's very like, I know what I know. I've been doing this forever. Obviously they clash quite a bit. He has one of the most raw conversations with his mom in the kitchen at one point in the story that it's so interesting because it called to me on both sides. Like, it called to me as a mother, but it also called to me as someone's child. And it was a beautiful conversation between a mother and her son, and a mother who opened up and told her son the truth about like what she had thought her life was going to be like, and then what it ended up being like, and how she felt about that shift. But yeah, it's, and I won't keep saying anything else because I fear I would talk about it too much and I'll spoil it, but you really get to know Everett. You get to know him, and you get to see him kind of go through some of those like life changes that happen when you realize that there's another world out there, right? Like when you're a kid, you perceive the world a certain way. And as you start to get older, as you hit that senior year, freshman year of college, or, after you graduate, whatever, you start to realize that there's another world out there. And it's not as gentle as one would like, And sometimes our parents do us a disservice by kind of shielding us from how hard life can get and can be. I'm not saying necessarily that's what happened in this story, but just that shift in Everett of watching him, enter his senior year, and he meets a girl and he falls in love, but what can be of that love, and are they on the same page? And it's kind of like that all-consuming obsessive infatuation the first time you fall in love, where like in your mind you can't see your future without this person, but in reality, like you guys are kids. It's very likely you're not going to have a future together like that, you know? What pulled me in was the author's writing. The writing feels very intentional. Like every word is being chosen to make me understand whatever it is feeling. Every word is being chosen so that I can get a clear picture of where this kid lives and what it's like for him to go to school and what his truck looks like and what it feels like on the inside, what it smells like. Everything was just so vivid in the writing, and it was so poetic at the same time. Like it really felt like the author was just guiding me gently through this story. I think that's what made it so much more heartbreaking to watch Everett kind of go through this year, is how gently we did it with him. Like it was never, there were never like violent, aggressive moments. There were never loud moments. You know, obviously Everett had his moments where he reacted physically to something that was going on. And I would say that he has a little bit of a short temper throughout the story, but you know, it's not an explosive story in that sense. It's a very soft one. If that, I don't know if these words make sense the way I'm picking them, but this is just what I'm thinking when I think of this book. Every time I've seen it since I finished it, these are the words flying through my brain. You know what else I think, and maybe this will make more sense. I think the other part outside of the writing style itself that really drew me in, and I don't know, like it started to change how I was perceiving my own life, quite frankly, a little bit. The book is split into seasons. You have your chapters, of course, but it has seasons, and you start in the summer of 1995, and then you go through the fall, and then you go through the winter, and then you go back into the spring. And I think the same way the seasons were changing in this book throughout the story, you could see that Everett's experiences were kind of shifting with those seasons, right? Like in the summer, it was a little bit more fun. I feel like it was a little bit more lighthearted. But then you got into the fall where things started to get a little heavier. You started to understand the consequences that were following you from the summer, right? And then you get into the winter and things just get really blistery, I'm going to say. Like it really does start to feel like your life is this snowstorm, this blizzard that won't stop. And you have no idea how much snow you're going to get, but you know that it's going to be a pain in the ass when it's done falling and you have to go outside and clean that car. And then you shift into the spring where things start to feel a little bit lighter, but also you know that you kind of like, you know, 4 seasons in a year, you've kind of come to the end and now something new needs to start the next time summer picks up. It's kind of like that. I hope that I'm doing this book justice because it just felt so emotionally impactful to me when I was reading it. Because I'm reading it and I'm in a season where I'm not super comfortable. I'm not incredibly happy with where I'm at right now. I want things to change and I'm trying to figure out how I can get those things to change. Also having to pick and choose what to change because I'm in a part of my life as a parent where I can't change everything in our lives. I have to, you know, I have to consider what it's like for my daughter too when I uproot us and whatever, you know. But something that the author did so beautifully was to kind of point out that the seasons change, and in changing that means that a season's going to pass. So Everett's going through all of these emotions, all of these experiences as he's becoming a young man. And I something I felt like he was learning by the end of the story is that shit sucks right now. It sucks and it's hard and it didn't work out the way you wanted to, but guess what? Spring is coming. And maybe spring will be better. And you know what? Maybe spring wasn't the best, but you had some good times. You had some really good times in the spring. Maybe it ended on a sour note, but guess what? Summer's coming. And I think summer might be better this year around. It puts into perspective that life occurs in seasons, kind of. Oh my God, I sound so corny. It occurs in seasons. So when you're in a really shitty season, you kind of have to be hopeful and you have to have faith that it's going to pass and you're going to be in the next season. And maybe the next season will be better. You know, maybe it won't be, oh my God, A plus spectacular, give me 15 of them, but maybe it'll be a little bit better than the season you were just in. And that is what I took away from A Good Animal, is that sometimes you have to weather the season that you're in and you have to kind of sit in being uncomfortable and feeling stretched thin because it's going to end. You know, that season's going to end at some point and you're going to be in the next one and the next one might be better. It might not. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but I have faith that the next season I enter will be better than the one I'm in right now. And it just put into perspective that sometimes we start to wallow and we hyperfixate on all the shitty things going on, but like it's hard. It's easier said than done, of course, but sometimes you do have to practice a little bit of optimism and look forward to something better. Even if you don't know if it's there, even if you can't see it right away, you just have to kind of be optimistic and look forward and have faith in that things will maybe get better for you. And while this story ended off on a very bittersweet note, it was such a bittersweet ending, and it tore my entire heart out of my chest. Multiple times, this author made me cry. Just gonna say. And there's no trigger warnings or content warnings, but I will say there is child loss and there is animal. There are things that happen to the animals that if you love animals, maybe you won't like. I'm gonna say that. I think for me personally, I went into this story and I was like, oh, a 17-year-old boy. I wonder what I'm doing. Why am I reading this? But the author gave Everett such a strong voice, and you watched him become more confident. You watched him kind of spread those wings a little bit. And that, I just think, I just thought it was beautiful. I thought it was beautiful, and it reminded me so much of some of my favorite stories because that's what my favorite stories have done. They've changed the way I consume the next story. And they've honestly kind of made me sit back and gain a little bit of perspective. Things are not always exactly what they seem, and sometimes I get stuck in a black hole of pessimism. And it's okay to feel your feels, in my opinion. I think it's okay to be sad when you're sad, mad when you're mad, right? But at some point, you gotta work to get yourself out of it. And yeah, this was. It's one of those books that you're like, oh, 6 stars, infinity stars, but it's just one of those books you can't rate. You can't rate it because it's outside, it's in a league of its own. And I think it's in a league up there with The Midnight Library and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue for me. It's up there with The Winter Soldier. Like, those are books that really made me pause. They really made me stop and think, like, am I just reading a story or am I reading something that has a message? What is that message? What is that message for me? Is it the same message that the next person's going to get? I don't know, but I know for me, the message of this book is life happens in seasons, which means that one season is going to have to end for another to start, which means that there's hope on the horizon, Just have some faith and some hope that things will get better. Obviously, you have to work towards things getting better, but not feeling like everything I'm doing is a waste of time and a waste of breath. And I really wanted to share this with you guys because I loved it so much. I loved it so much. It literally tore my heart out several times, and I've been thinking about these characters ever since I finished the book because Everett's the main character, but you have Charlie, his best friend. You have Kylie, who's Charlie's like girlfriend, and they go through something. You have Mary. You have his parents. Like, there's so many characters in this book, and they really all do come together and tell a beautiful story of a young man, of a young boy learning to be a young man, quite frankly. So, if you are ever in the market for a fantastic literary fiction that might or might not decimate you in under 300 pages, I would highly recommend A Good Animal. I think that I am a lit fic girly. Sometimes I forget that there's other genres out there, and I'm like, I don't know what to read, and I'm looking at just all fantasy because that's what I read primarily. And then there's a whole other bookshelf by my door that has like lit fic, contemporary fic, romance. It has all different types of books. I think sometimes I forget that those books exist until, I don't know, you just pick one up and you're like, shit, I forgot how much I like literary fiction. I prefer literary fiction because I feel like they're more character driven. I think it's more of character studies for me, in my opinion. Where contemporary fiction, I feel like it is character driven, but I feel like it's also kind of driven by the times. If that makes sense. I don't know if that made sense, but that's how I perceive it when I'm reading them. I'm kind of like, oh, like, I don't love how like contemporary this is, if I'm being honest. I do prefer them to be a little bit older, which I tend to find more often in lit fics. And now I'm just in a lit fic rabbit hole. I'm reading Demon Copperhead and I'm absolutely loving it. Is it destroying me? Yes, little by little. But I've been laughing. I've cried. I've felt pity. I've felt empathy. I have felt just such a range of emotions reading Demon Copperhead, much like A Good Animal. They are beautiful stories, and they're stories, like it's telling you a story about someone and what they're going through, what they're doing. And I think they're beautiful. But yeah, if you're in the market for a lit fic, or if you're subscribed to Book of the Month, I think you can add this to your your book box or whatever it's called. Highly, highly recommend A Good Animal. It was beautiful and it was bittersweet. And I loved it so much. And this is definitely going on the shelf of books that will be reread probably every year. Like when I reread The Midnight Library next January, I'm probably going to read this in February to follow it up because it was fantastic. It was that impactful and that powerful of a story. It just sucks though, because I mean, it doesn't suck, but it does suck because this is a debut novel. So this author doesn't have anything else for me to read, which I suppose is fine. You know, it's okay, but I will be on the lookout for this author to put out another book because I will be picking it up, you know, as long as it calls to me. But I would love to read more of this author because this was fantastic. So that is my book review of A Good Animal. It was sappy and emotional and messy and chaotic. But you know what? That's what this book put me through. That's what I experienced in the 3 days that I was reading this book, savoring it, might I add. I literally read it so slow because I didn't want it to end. I really wanted to spotlight this book because of how it made me feel and how I'm still feeling after I finished it. But you know me. I just wanted to get on here and kiki about books with you guys. As always, thank you guys so much for watching the video and for supporting, and I will see you next time. Happy reading.